So I'd like to welcome you to our first event of the Propel Festival, which launches today and runs until the 12th of June. And for the first time ever, Propel is a festival of digital performance, and it includes work from all 4 years of the Contemporary Performance Practice programme. The festival should have launched yesterday, but we wanted to demonstrate our solidarity with people of colour in the Conservatoire, Scotland and abroad. And because of this, we participated in the movement within dance, music and the performing arts industries to pause our activity and to disrupt the norm. So this is why we are launching today. So before I introduce you to our speaker today, I'll just draw attention to a couple of things. There's a chat box where you can let us know of any issues or technical things that we need to know about. There's also a Q&A box, and I would encourage you to put any questions in that you might have for Ryan throughout the course of his talk. And what we'll do today is we will hear Ryan's talk, his artist talk, and then we'll have time for some questions at the end. So I would also like to welcome Jill Gallagher, who is our BSL interpreter for today. So before I introduce Ryan, let me just say a few things about the Propel Festival. So the definition of contemporary is existing or happening now. And as a festival of contemporary performance, Propel attempts to interrogate the way in which we can continue to make new work while in quarantine. And I just want to say how proud I am of all of the students for really rising to this challenge. It's been a completely new experience teaching live performance online and learning in that way. So yes, very well done to everybody involved. So in this festival, we will question the impossibility of the live, the differently live, and the new demands of audiences and performers as we navigate this particular moment that we find ourselves in. So as I said, our opening event is an artist talk by Ryan Morgan, who's going to be speaking about arts in inclusive practice, focusing on his work in prisons. And Ryan has been working with Jess Thorpe as his tutor. And Jess Thorpe is very well known for her extensive and radical work within the Scottish prison system. So this year, the module has been different, but potentially this new context has shed a different light on some ideas around isolation and freedom. So I'm going to hand over to Ryan now to share with us his artist talk. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, Laura. I'll share my screen and then maybe you can tell me if it's working. Can everyone see that? There's something in the more. Yeah, okay, cool. So hello everybody. I hope you're well and safe. Thank you, Laura, for that introduction. And I would like to extend my thanks to everyone for being here today. My PowerPoint skills are not the best, so please don't be put off by them. Whether we like it or not, we are all here for one reason. We have a human fascination with the subject of prisons. No matter what walk of life we come from, we have all at one point looked at prison from the outside or the inside and asked someone, what is that?
Apologies, Ryan, I'm going to interrupt you there. We're having a little issue where we can't see Jill, so I'm just going to try and rectify that before you move on, if that's okay. Let me see.
Sorry, that's
so if you can let me know in the chat if Jill is visible, that would be great. Can't see Jill. Okay, let me try. I've pinned her. Let me see. Yes, okay. Is that working now? Can everybody see? Yes, 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 yes. Fabulous. Okay, apologies for that. Thank you for your patience. Ryan, I suggest you take it from the top. Fabulous.
Okay. Sorry, that was my fault for also not checking the chat. I'll start from the beginning. Whether we like it or not, we are here for one reason. We have a human fascination with the subject of prisons. No matter what walk of life we come from, we have all at one point looked at a prison from the outside or the inside and asked someone, what is that? We may have done this subconsciously to ourselves, delving into our own research in order to learn from the vast pool of knowledge. Or, like myself, we asked someone like a parent. And for the most part, we are told when we ask this question something along the lines of, that's where the bad people go. That's for the criminals. And just hope you don't end up there. I grew up in Kirkintilloch, a town right outside of Glasgow, neighbouring Lenzie, Mulgai, Croy, and Bishopbriggs. If you're familiar with the CPP programme and its events, you will most likely be aware of Mulgai as the home of Magda Country Park, and you'll know Bishopbriggs as the home of HMP Low Moss. Low Moss is about a 10-minute drive away from my childhood home and can hold up to 784 prisoners at capacity. For me, my fascination with prisons did not end when told that that's where the bad people go. Instead, it grew. Throughout my childhood, I became infatuated with pop culture representations of prisons, falling into the trap of having cell bars and escapes fantasized in movies like The Great Escape, The Green Mile, Shawshank Redemption, Escape from Alcatraz, to name only but a few. I would say my fascination was leveled throughout my early childhood, but at the age of 12, it skyrocketed. But as a child, I, of course, had a playful and childish aspect and grip on things, almost like this presentation up until now. Lured in by pop culture, it came as a deadweight truth when my dad's friend was sentenced to 16 years without parole at HMP Low Moss. My pop culture influenced view of prisons was shattered when I visited him for the second of 2 times, and I was aware that there is no escape. This is no joke. People spend their lives here, and people will die here. In 2019, I was asked what module I would like to do in my 4th year. And being I'm not sure if this is the right phrasing, a prison fanatic, there was no question. The Arts and Criminal Justice Settings module was my go-to since 1st year. I'd heard good things from 4th years consistently, and that the module was more than just a workshop in a prison. But 4th years, I said, what else could you possibly do for an 8-week process? Are you just going to read? Well, I wasn't too far off the mark. Let me get this straight first, however. I usually don't enjoy reading. But what I've found through this module is that it is one of the most accessible in terms of teaching, one of the most intriguing in terms of subject, and one of the most fruitful in terms of learning. I have been, as we all have, locked up due to the COVID-19 situation for the past few weeks, months, years, 72 days. My experience of this module has been both invigorating and essential as it could have been had I gone into a prison. I, of course, could not do this. Instead, I spent a lot of time reading. I'm aware that had COVID not happened, I would have already been into a prison and run workshops and have created a performance alongside inmates. And yet, I don't feel disappointed. Jess Thorpe, my lecturer and a long-time prison artist, told me at the beginning that when doing work in a prison, context is more than half the work. And she's absolutely right. I look at my naivety in asking, but fourth years, what else could you possibly do for an 8-week process? Are you just going to read? Because if you do this module, or if you have done this module, you will know that there would be no point in the module without the reading. One does not simply walk into a prison without the context, especially as an artist. My learning for the last few weeks has been digital. And as I say, this has been almost a blessing in disguise. I've researched and read more about the subject of prisons than I ever did in all the hours spent in the Whitaker Library at RCS for my dissertation. It's a module that entices you. It's a module that lures you in, and it sticks with you. Jess, as a tutor, has been as flexible and as accommodating as she ever could have been. And I am grateful to have had such tremendous mentorship over the past 8 weeks. In my first week, I tackled the subject of what are prisons for. In my second, we discussed the US penal system and the systemic racism and modern slavery, which is all too apparent and alive since the end of the Civil War 155 years ago in 1865. In my third, we began talking about women in prison and their relationship to their families. In my fourth, we focused on the theory of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and how, in the words of Dr. Suzanne Zedijk, trauma begets trauma. In my fifth week, we began to look at art in prisons and how the learning over the past few weeks influences our role as artists. And in my sixth week, this research continued, looking at companies like Vox Luminous, Clean Break, and Geese Theatre Company. We looked at shows like What I Want My Words to Do to You by Eve Ensler, the documentary film Shakespeare Behind Bars, and The Choir by Gareth Malone. And finally, my seventh week was taken up by my research going into practice to create a bespoke creative resource designed for prisoners in lockdown, a response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Here is but a small list of the films and TV shows I have engaged with over the past few weeks. These can be listed in the chat box at the end. Theatre and prison by Kiva McAvinchie. Ross Kemp, Behind Bars, Barlinnie. Stacey Dooley Investigates, Locked Up with the Lifers. Prison, on All Four. Dr. Suzanne Zeedyk and ACEs. Dr. Gwen Robinson from the University of Sheffield. Fergus McNeill from Glasgow University. The National Criminal Justice Arts Alliance. Jess Thorpe's writings, of course. Louis Theroux, Miami Mega Jail. And there's a whole other list. Stormzy, Shakespeare. Shakespeare Behind Bars. What I Want My Words to Do to You by Eve Ensler. Hurricane by Bob Dylan. The 13th by Ava DuVernay. Vox Luminous. Geese. Clean Break. Taisheng Che. And Grass is Greener by Fred Braithwaite. And perhaps one of the most beneficial and essential resources is the justiceartscoalition.org. Sorry, there's something in the chat. Oh, it's from Laura, sorry. I would love to say that I have the answers to the questions that I set out to answer. But as someone pointed out in one of Jess and I's open discussions that we've had, this subject matter breeds more questions than it does answers. I'm writing this as I near the end of my module, and I'm speaking to you today even closer to that end, and I still don't have any answers. The subject of prisons is ingrained and intriguing, and I would recommend in a heartbeat to anyone thinking about engaging with the subject to not only read a few things, but to hand yourself over to the journey of it. There is a lot of learning to be undone around prisons, and a lot that needs to change. And as artists, I don't know if we have that power yet. But with the correct learning, then I believe we could be closer to reform than ever before. I believe we can use the artistic journey we carry out to better the lives of those that the system has both forgotten and stands against. I would like now to give you an example of the creative resource that I've created in order to begin this change in my own learning and in the lives of a few prisoners in HMP Shotts and Pullman Young Offenders Institution. Oh, there we go. This is an image of the final resource that I created. The resource is presented as a gift in a box, tied with a pen and hand-bound, not only for an aesthetic point of view, but also from somewhere human. A gift is a gift, and that's what this resource is. The book inside the box is the resource itself, filled with a total of 50 prompts designed to inspire creativity and evoke movement, writing, collating, and performance tasks. Designed to be interacted with using only the pen provided, this resource seeks to break down the idea of art only existing when a facilitator is present. In the instructions to the book, I prompt the reader that they can engage in any way that they see fit. I designed this book with the idea in mind that someone could be locked up in solitary confinement amidst lockdown and be handed this, a pack which seeks to break the stigma of punishment. I expect this resource to be handed over from guard to prisoner, which is what I would like to happen. However, since the lockdown began, these modes of contact have, of course, been hard for artists and teaching staff alike, as the prisons have closed down their education sectors for the time being. This means that right now, during COVID, there is no way to be certain that this resource will reach the prisoners. I know that the prisons allow prisoners to be out for 30 minutes to an hour a day. And for the time they're locked up, they simply need something to do. If we, in our flats, are struggling with the pandemic, when we have TVs, books, radio, music, essential shopping, video games, and family, then I simply cannot begin to imagine what it is like to be in a prison right now. Just hope you never end up there. We know that the statistics of art in prison work in reducing both reoffending rates and in mental health. The company Soft Touch Arts released statistics around this, saying that after a year, there are raised aspirations in 77% of participants, improved confidence and self-esteem in 69%, and improved behaviour in 58%. But engaging with this system is fraught with complications, which is certainly strange when we look at what the Scottish Prison Service, or the SPS, wants from its own services, and by correlation, what it would want from artists engaging with their prisoners. Colin McConnell, there he is, the most recent chief executive of the SPS, states in Working in Scottish Prisons, an Artist's Guide by Jess Thorpe, that the benefits of the creative arts have been well documented in underpinning rehabilitation initiatives across SPS, to building a safer and stronger Scotland by unlocking potential and transforming the lives in our care, of those in our care. So to unlock this potential, what better way is there than to set out a list for performance-making tasks, creative tasks, writing tasks that are designed to help someone be creative somehow. I say that my task for this book is to provoke creativity. I'm currently in conversation with Glass Performance to get the resource into both Pullman and Shots, and also to take the resource to figure within the SPS, to figures within the SPS, to further the resource to benefit prisoners in this tough time rather than isolate them even more. I hope I've covered everything, but I would like to take this time to just say that now more than ever, especially within the United States, we are gonna see a rise in incarceration and wrongful imprisonment. I highly, highly recommend starting with Ava DuVernay's The 13th on Netflix. It interrogates the systemic racism in the United States penal system, and it is critical now more than ever to understand that history. Thank you again for coming along, and I hope now I can answer some questions.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you so much for your talk. It was great to hear your reflections. And I think if you stop screen sharing now, we'll all be on the screen again. And yes, thank you for being willing to start again there after we had a little technical hitch. So great. So we've got a few questions that your audience have popped in the chat box, so I can guide us through them. I'll maybe just do them in order. And actually, the first question is from Julia, who says, I was wondering if you had anything to say about the paid bail system that's in place in the US. It especially feels uncomfortable at the moment re George Floyd, etc., that what feels like an effective solution is to effectively fund the prison system that's causing the issue. So yes, Ryan, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, like I say, I don't have any answers, and I think that for something like that and the subject issue that's going on right now, it's just I hate the word because I feel like it's overused, but it's such an unprecedented time. And I think for me the problem doesn't I don't know, it's difficult, isn't it? Yeah, I think that in terms of the paid bail system, I think that as an artist and through the research that I've done, I'm more on side of just don't arrest people. So it will be biased what I say, but yeah, I don't know. I don't think I have an answer to it. I think it is such a difficult time, and I think that, like I said at the end, the numbers of incarceration, I think especially against Black people and minorities, is just going to skyrocket. Yeah, and I think that's another ingrained problem. That yeah, it needs someone to do something about it, and I don't know who that person is, or maybe it's the people that are rioting, and maybe it's, you know, people with some more power.
I mean, it's definitely, feels quite concerning in terms of the, coronavirus situation, in terms of potentially, huge swathes of people being imprisoned for action at this time. So, I mean, it is worth mentioning, the kind of differing systems, prison systems as well.
Yeah.
And I know your focus with Jess has certainly been the kind of Scottish context. There's quite a few other questions. So I'll maybe guide us through them. Rita has asked if your research has included or will include looking at deaf people in prison. Is that something you've come across at all, Ryan?
I spent a bit of time in my third or fourth week looking at accessibility in prison, because I think when I got interested in, the way that this resource and like workshops and art that goes in interacts with prisoners. And so me and Jess had a lot of conversations about how accessible you make a space and what you take in as a starting point. And so in things like Shakespeare Behind Bars, in that film, the majority of the people in that prison are working class or middle class people who are well read, I suppose. And so they know how to access Shakespeare, whereas I think that if you took Shakespeare into a young offenders institute or something, it would be another barrier. And so I think that in terms of this resource, I tried to make it as, accessible as possible. And I think that as an artist, I've always tried to make my work accessible. And I'm always quite interested in how work can adapt to fit lots of different people, because I think that if it just sticks to one demographic, then what's the outreach? Yeah.
Thanks, Ryan. Thank you. The next question is from Florence, who asks, what were your initial questions at the start of the module, and how did those questions change?
Yeah, I think the biggest one was a prompt from Jess before we even had our first class, and that was what are prisons for? And it was off of the back of Theatre in Prison, one of the books that I said. And then, about 4 weeks in, Jess asked me to do the task again. And the difference in how I approached that question and the language that I used and the outlooks that I had definitely changed. And I think it comes back to that thing of there's a lot of unlearning about deeply ingrained things that needs to happen. And I've been really fixated on this idea that prisons are an idea that are there since we're really young, and we get told what they are and we get told not to question them. And so when you do start to question them, yeah, the way I approached the water prisons for question 4 weeks in, I came at it from such a research-based point of view and such a humane point of view, I suppose. And instead of going at it in terms of, oh, it's for the bad people, that's where bad people go, I came at it from a point of view of, okay, these people are there for a reason, but how can we help them? And how can we sort of expose a system in order to help the people that are deeply affected by it? And so I think that after this, and like continuing the research, every time I see something about a prison now compared to when like a documentary, compared to when I saw one in the first week, I definitely come at it from that point of view of how does this documentary or reading or film treat the prisoners? What view is it coming from? How biased is it? Who are the people you're speaking to? What statistics are you given? What statistics are you leaving out? Yeah, I think context is everything, as Jess said. And yeah, I definitely look at things now from I don't know if left is the right word, but a very humane point of view, I suppose.
Thanks, Ryan. We've got a question from Sandy. Hi, Sandy. Saying, hi, Ryan, Laura and Jill. Thank you for your great talk. I just wanted to ask what you hope to do post-graduation with what you've learned and how you bring your practice together. Really great question, Sandy.
Yeah. Obviously, I've been thinking about this a lot because I've got about 2 weeks left. And yeah, I think this module has definitely sparked something in me. And I always say this, but it was about the second or third week when I was watching one of the documentaries and I was looking up jobs in the Ministry of Justice because I just felt so affected by it and so on the side of something needs to change and how can I do it, and realised you need a whole other degree. So I probably yeah, that's time. But I think for me right now, the main focus is to further this resource and work on how it can go into more prisons and how it can be noticed by people in the SPS and in the sector, and also how it can be adapted to fit. So something I didn't say in that is that in the research phase for the creative resource, I didn't think of it as going into a prison all the time. I looked at it sometimes as, if I sent this to a neighbour, how could it be accessible? If I sent this to a care home, how could that be accessible? And yeah, I'm just quite interested in how it can adapt and how it can change and how there, could be different versions of it. And so I'll definitely stay in contact with Jess and Jess and Pullman Youth Theatre and fourth years and all the fourth years that have done the module before and are now in the sector, and keep having the open discussions, which maybe I can talk more about at the end of this actually, that me and Jess are running.
If I could also maybe just add, Ryan, I'll give you a little breather from answering questions, because I obviously was lucky enough to access one of the resources for Ryan's assessment on Friday. And I think what I was really struck by it, and somebody has asked, would the document you created be available for us to read and access? It sounds like you've had a rich experience, and thank you for sharing it with us. And I think what I found from experiencing this this document as opposed to seeing live prison work was thinking about the kind of the longevity perhaps of this, this invitation to tasks that inspire creativity that potentially could last quite a long time. So that felt like a really unique thing that's come out of this delivery of the module and this context, but actually something really valuable because, potentially it's something that that a prisoner or as you say, if it was adapted to other contexts, could actually have and be inspired by for quite some time. So yeah, that was just one of my observations of looking at this this document.
Yeah.
We've got loads of questions, and I must say it's a really great turnout. We have 40 people here listening to your talk, Ryan, which is fantastic. So I've got another question. What was the most shocking thing that you learned about prisons from your studies?
I think that for me, the 13th by Ava DuVernay is shocking because it gets to the heart of what it's talking about from the get-go and doesn't let you go. And it exposes the history of slavery and how, of course, slavery hasn't ended, and it's still very much alive, but in particular how the prison system and the criminal justice system in America has been molded around slavery. And I think the really great thing about the 13th was the fact that I think it's an hour and a half or 2 hours long. It's quite dense, but it's also so accessible. And it tells you the facts, and it's not afraid to tell them, because I was watching an interview with Ava DuVernay, and she makes the point that minorities in America and all over the world have been silenced for so long, and there's no point in it anymore. And so you might as well expose it. And I really, really would. I mean, it sounds like I've worked on it or something, but I really, really would recommend watching it. It's, like I say, it's quite heavy, but it's essential, and it's just so emotional, and it's so tragic to see it all put out in front of you and know that it's happening. So I would probably say that.
Thanks, Ryan. There's another question from Sanjay, but I'm going to move to somebody who we've not had a question from, and I'll come back to you, Sanjay, if we've got time. Gary Gardner asks, I'm interested in how you might take your learning into a prison context if you had been able. What kind of work would you like to make, and what would be your priority?
Yeah. Well, when I was working on that Into the New show, it was a one-on-one music sharing conversation. And I always wanted, because I knew prison was coming up, I always wanted to know how, or learn how to adapt that piece or that theory. And as an artist, I would probably say that I'm a music-based artist. I'm a one-on-one based artist. And I think that had I gone into a prison, that would have been a starting point. And obviously, don't know where it would have went, but I think one-on-one and music together can be so powerful and get into the heart of something, and you can talk about so much through it that it's, I think one-on-one is a starting point for me whenever I do a process. It was in third year, and it has been in fourth year, and it's been quite nice actually, because I suppose me and Jess on Zoom every day has also been a one-on-one experience, and it's been really nice to have that. And you can just have such earnest conversation, and I think that if I ever went in a prison, that would be my starting point, is one-on-one.
That's great, thank you, Ryan. The next couple of questions are maybe connected. So there's one from Gudrun asking about the resource and saying, could you give some examples of the kind of creative stimuli and exercises you've come up with? And then the next question from Megan asks, what was the process like in researching and creating content for the book resource? What was your favourite creative prompt? So I don't know if there's maybe a joint response to those where you could share some material from the resource.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just getting the Word document with it all up now. Okay, so let's go with, give some examples. Yeah, like I said in the presentation, I was really focused on how you give tasks that can be interacted with just the pen provided, or just the paper, or a blank room, an empty room, because for the reality of the main situation that I was sending it into, of people in solitary confinement, that's the reality of it, that they have a bed and a toilet, and I really wanted it to be something that they get given and they can open it. And so I had a little system set up where the colors on the pages, there were 4 colors on it. There was red, blue, green, and orange. And red were move tasks, blue were write tasks, green were collate tasks, and orange were perform tasks. And yeah, the move and the write task were the biggest part of the resource, because for me, they're the ones that as an artist, they kind of boost my creativity, I suppose. And so, like for an example of some of them, some of the movement ones are, think of an inspiration to you, act like them, walk like them, talk like them. Another one is scratch your nose, scratch your ear, make a dance going between these 2 movements. Another one is stand up, choose a body part and begin to shake it. Count down from 60 seconds, keep shaking, and then sit down. And then some of the right ones are write a shopping list as if you have £1 billion, write a letter to an actor, tell them how you could do better than them in detail, draw the poster for the movie about your life, draw a video game character, draw yourself. And then all of these in the perform section at the end, the orange coloured ones, are things like recreate scenes, tasks, 21, 22, 23, and 24, which were tasks like, oh, sorry, you've gone, I'll get you back, which were tasks like, like describe in detail the first time you broke a bone, describe in detail the first time you rode a bike. And so the last section really is bringing the whole thing together, so that if you go to it and you realize that you've done tasks 13, 14, and 16, and it's put 13, 14, 15, 16 together, that you can go back and you can do it, and then by the end, hopefully you've got a few little performances that you can do for yourself. So those are a few examples, and the process and researching and creating was, I took so much inspiration from the Wreck This Journal by Kerry Smith, which is a journal which does as it says. It's full of little prompts that are how you can destroy it. So there's things like, tear this page out, put it in your pocket, put the jeans through the wash, and then stick it back in. Or take this to the tallest place you can and throw it away. And then go get it, obviously. And so yeah, I took inspiration from little tasks like that that are quite simple, and you can flick through it and you can land on one, and you can just do it, or you can think, I need to move, or I need to write, and you can just go and do it. And my favorite creative prompt would probably be, describe in as much detail the first time you jumped on a trampoline. I don't know why. When I wrote that one, I was like, that sounds like a good thing, I'm going to do that. And I did, so that was my favourite one.
Thanks, Ryan. And I think what I've really loved about reading this, you know, you've framed it at the top as kind of how to pass the time, and then at the bottom, tasks that inspire creativity. But it is almost like a kind of hypertext where, you know, you're encouraging maybe development of ideas or connection of ideas as well. So I think I've really enjoyed that, as well as the invitations for like reflection on your own life and kind of creative tasks. So it feels like a really great range. I think you've probably responded to Craig's question, which was next, which was what sort of exercise you included. So I hope, Craig, you feel like that's been responded to. Abby's got a really good question about the distribution of the resource, if it's going to be copied or recreated, and what would that mean for the integrity of the resource. So yes, will it exist in its original form and be used by one person at a time? Because I know one of the criteria was thinking of it as a bespoke resource. So yes.
Yeah, totally. So me and Murray was Murray Wason was a creative collaborator with me to help me get ideas going and work on the resource, and we definitely spoke about this. And yeah, I think for me, so the boxes and the books and the colours in the corners and the binding on them, like I say, were all done by hand. And the painting, the black squares and stuff, as you can see on Laura's. So that's all done by hand. And Jess asked me a good question in my presentation about how long it takes to make one, and physically it probably takes about 3 or 4 hours to make one, and I write the tasks by hand as well. And so the reproduction value of them, because all the tasks are the same, could be like printed, copied and printed. That's a page that I hand drew, and the task is to mirror that on the blank page on the left. I think that for me, I would really like them to have as many as possible, but I do understand about the integrity, and I don't know how I would feel about a photocopied version of it, because I feel like it would begin to feel a bit mass produced, and the instruction page at the very start, so that's printed, but I sign I don't sign it. I hate saying sign because it makes it sound like I'm the artist, but I've handwritten my name at the end of it. It's written like a letter, and the idea is to handwrite their name, whoever is interacting with it, at the top as well. And I think that really holds something really important, because I want these resources to feel like they belong to the person, and I want the person to feel like I've taken time to make it for them and put the effort in. So it's that strange line between wanting so many people to have them, but also I would also like to hand make them all, and I don't know if I have the time for that. But definitely make as many as I can, I suppose.
And I would say, Ryan, I mean, it definitely does feel like a gift, you know, the way that you've presented it and packaged it, and it definitely does have that, and I know that's what your intention was. And we're almost out of time, and we've got some really nice comments. Grace is just saying, really proud that you've taken on the module, doing the research. Abby's also said, thanks for a great talk. We have a couple of questions about music. And obviously, I know that music is important to you, Ryan. So Katie asks, have you come across any interesting music in prisons projects in your studies, aside from the choir? And then Jeff, welcome Jeff, asks, I agree music is a great way to connect. With Jess, I saw prisoners say that artwork made them feel human for the first time. So my question is, do you think prison can achieve rehabilitation rather than just punishment without the arts? Good question.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm currently trying to Google. So there is another piece, I believe it's by Vox Luminous, and they created a piece, and maybe Jess can correct me in the chat if I'm wrong about this, because my internet is going very slow. But there is a piece that is a music writing project. Distant Voices, that's the very one from Maria. Thanks, Maria. Distant Voices was a project that, from Vox Luminous, where they went in, and it was a group of professional musicians and a band, and they allowed the space and the creative sort of tasks and creative space, I'll say that. Thank you, Jess, for the link to that. To write songs, and then what the musicians did at the end was that they performed those songs and they sold CDs, and they released it as an album. And I do really think that music has a really important place in connection, and I'm really sad that I didn't get to go in, because I know that music would have been a really big part of my process, and I know that because it was in my Into the New. It was the heart of it, and in that I had so many conversations that were genuine connection with people that I didn't expect to have connections with. And so the choir is a great one. It's on YouTube if you would like to watch it. And yeah, I would check out Distant Voices as well. Vox Luminous are also a music company, a music theatre company, if I'm not wrong. And so most of their work centres around music and criminal justice. So yes, I hope that answers.
Thanks, Ryan. We are just going to finish up in one moment. There's a couple of questions in the chat box as well. One from Katie asking about, is racism systemic in the UK criminal justice system, and what can we all do to help tackle it if it is? Any thoughts on that, Ryan?
I think that Yeah, I've not done research to back up a distinct answer. I wouldn't be surprised if it is. I think that I also need to do the reading around it, because I feel like, yeah, we've looked at the US because the US is the clearest form of systemic criminal justice racism. I think that in Scotland, a big thing that we focused on is that the reason that Scotland criminal justice doesn't have a problem in terms of Black people being incarcerated, it's because Scotland doesn't have a large Black community. But what you find in Scotland is that it's more focused on class, and the majority of men in prison in Scotland are working class men. And so, as it is for race in the US, I think that in Scotland it's more class based. But yeah, like I say, I've not done the readings on it yet. I know that I definitely will. And yeah, I wish I had a better answer.
I noticed Jess was posting on social media today some articles about that, and I wonder if maybe the last question could be Jess's question. She asked, what daily practice did you decide to do to support your deepening understanding of issues in the criminal justice system? Mm-hmm. That's such a tutor question, Jess.
Yeah, yes, the daily practice that I took part in was a very simple one, and it was opening up my living room window and just looking out and doing nothing but looking out. Yeah, no music, no TV, no talking to Jen, who I live with, none of that. And I think that allowed me to, I'm not ever going to say that me being locked up is the same as a prisoner locked up, because that's just not true. But I think that it allowed me, I spent 10 minutes there each day, because for me there's a direct correlation between the fact that we can also go outside for an hour a day, but when we go outside we can go anywhere we want, and when we open our window we can fully open our window. And yeah, it was a daily practice that allowed me a lot of space before I went into the research to sort of empty my head, I suppose, and just really go into the mind space of I'd done the daily practice is basically what I'm saying, and it worked. And I think that for me it informed the research, but it was more about getting into a mind space than it was directly looking at if me looking out my window is this, then how does that relate to someone in a prison looking out their window, I suppose. But I am aware of the correlations, if any, that could have been there.
Thank you, Ryan. And Jess is saying sorry for our tutor question. Don't apologise, it's a great question. I think we should draw this event to a close, and thank you, Jill, who has been signing for us. Some really great questions and conversation to start off the festival. So a big thank you to Ryan for sharing his work, and yeah, this resource as well, which feels like a really exciting development from this module. So just to finish, I would invite you to join us for the rest of the Propel Festival. We have 2 shows this evening, Matrimony, directed by Julia Fisher, and at 7 p.m, and also one-man shows directed by Minnie Crook at 8 p.m, and then a whole bunch of other events until the 12th of June, including artist talks from other student artists as well. So thank you very much, and we will see you at the rest of the festival.
Thank you.